I think that creativity sometimes just is one of those things where it's so personal that
yeah.
if you put yourself out there, that it's sometimes hard not to take it personally. But I think we have to learn not to take it personally.
Yeah.
Speaking of Yabu Pushelberg and sort of like, you know, your trajectory, you obviously started as a junior.
Why do you assume that?
Well, girl, because you were just straight out of school. Like, no, you went straight to design director. Is that right? Your Cinderella story?
Yes.
Rags to riches, honey. This is where creativity gets lit. I'm talking bold pivots, design funks, and those tiny rituals that keep us grounded. I'm interior designer and creative director Aly Velji, and on AVD Inspire, I sit down with artists, makers, and icons for the real conversations behind the work. Persistence really pays off. Jonathan Sotto spent 2005 calling every design firm he could, until Yabu Pushelberg said yes. And now he's gone from designer to business development director. Jonathan and I bonded over a designer trip to Las Vegas during KBIS. Our love of interior design, RuPaul's Drag Race, and Beyoncé's Drunken Love brought us together. And now he's here to inspire us. I couldn't be more excited to introduce Jonathan Sotto to AVD Inspire. Welcome, friend.
Thank you, my friend. I can't remember that you remember we bonded over Drunken Love. That was...
Girl.
That night was a moment. That trip was a moment.
It was. And one thing before we sort of get into it is I have something to show you. And I don't know if you remember, but we were supposed to go to the Beyoncé concert together in Toronto. And I had to bail because I banged up my knee and had to get like stitches and everything. And you, delightful soul, sent me this t-shirt.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe you still have it.
Obviously. I'll never forget that. That was such an endearing, wonderful moment for me that I was just like, oh my God, he thought about me. And I was like, I was shocked. So thank you for that. I still have it.
What seems like it might be the smallest connection can lead to a long-lasting friendship. And so I'm glad that you have invited me to be part of this. And congratulations to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You know, and talking about these connections, I feel like your design trajectory has sort of changed so much. And I just wanted to maybe talk a little bit about like little Jonathan, when you were sort of a teenager and in school, like what did you want to be when you grew up?
What I wanted to be when I grew up was a pediatrician. I'll be very honest.
Okay.
It was completely not design related. In hindsight, though, if I'd paid attention to myself and what my interests were, which were drawing and creating and building, like my favorite toy was Lego and something called Tinker Toys, which I don't know if anybody remembers what they are, but they were just a series of sticks and like the wheels with the holes for sticks, and you could only make a limited number of shapes. But it was kind of my foray into creating, into architecture before I knew what architecture was. I remember I would often help my dad at his office on the weekends. And by help, I mean just hang out and stay out of trouble while he did his work. He introduced me to grid paper, which I'd never seen before. And I was probably about 8 years old. And somehow I managed to understand that, okay, I'm going to do a floor plan of the house I'm going to build for my parents when I become rich and famous. And I somehow was able to equate a square into 1 foot by 1 foot and understand what a foot was. And so there was a very mathematical side to me, which I was very well attuned to. I guess I didn't really make the connection to design until much later on. But when I studied at the University of Toronto and the human biology program, and I stopped after 2 years, and I was like, I want to do something more creative. There was something that wasn't fulfilling to me in the academic studies, and my mind instantly went to design. Sometimes you have the foresight from when you're very young. I didn't. I grew up in a very, I think, a moderately traditional Filipino home. And as an only child, there's expectations as a Filipino, as a person of color, first generation born to immigrant parents, that, you know, there are certain jobs that you get, not to feed into the stereotype. But my dad was a doctor of education and philosophy, and my mom was a nurse. There were certain things that were not acceptable, but encouraged in terms of
Yeah.
paths for career. But when there was an opportunity to change career paths or change my
Mm-hmm.
studies, I was like, you know what, it has to be design. It's
Right.
something that I felt my core just felt right to be studying.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know what type of design. I thought I wanted to go into architecture, which meant having to go back into school. I thought maybe, you know what, let me study the more technical aspects. Let me do
Mm-hmm.
a CAD
Mm-hmm.
program to see if I even am interested in
Right.
architecture, if I even have the skill set to do it. And in speaking with a few people, thankfully for having a good network of people around me, we were able to
Mm-hmm.
brainstorm and came to the conclusion I probably actually want to do interior design. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how I ended up in our field.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so when you did that jump, like, were your parents shocked? Was it a hard decision for you to make, or
Hmm.
were you just like, I'm doing it?
I had made up my own mind, and I was
Mm-hmm.
very scared to tell my parents. I think they were shocked.
Yeah.
They said, "Okay, you know what? Let's let this boy try." And I took a summer course at a local college for interior design, rather, and I excelled. I was happy. The work I
Mm-hmm.
was
Mm-hmm.
producing was receiving really great marks and really great feedback. And, you know, in design, it's all subjective. It's more about your portfolio and the creative output. And I think that they saw that there was something there. And it wasn't necessarily something that they could appropriately critique or apply
Mm-hmm.
value to. I think for them, thankfully, I have very supportive parents. They saw I was happy. And I think that
Yeah.
was their biggest worry, was that I would not land in a career that brought me fulfillment, enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
So thankfully, I had very supportive, hesitant, but supportive parents.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. For a lot of the listeners out there, I hope that, listening to this podcast, I feel like this is sort of something that is a common thread, and talking about doing something that you love and being fulfilled automatically just makes the universe bring things to you. Here's the thing about Robinson Lighting and Bath. They make my job so easy. While other shops are trying to keep up with trends, I'm scrolling through Robinson Lighting and Bath's Instagram page and getting so inspired by plumbing and lighting fixtures. They're showing me things I didn't even know I needed. Their showroom feels like a real life Pinterest page, and their team gets so excited when I come in with a huge challenge. Be sure to check out robinsonco.ca to browse or visit a showroom near you. I talked about this earlier when I was introing you, that cold calling is something that I honestly don't think people do anymore. It's all about just like sending out an email and not getting anything in return, and people just don't pick up the phone and call anymore.
Yeah.
But that wasn't you in 2005 when you
No.
graduated. So talk to me about that a little bit.
When I graduated, I actually graduated in 2003. And
Okay.
I felt a little bit of imposter syndrome.
Okay.
And I wasn't sure if I second guessed myself a lot coming out of school. It was a
Mm-hmm.
big deal. I had excelled in school. I
Mm-hmm.
did work that I was very proud of. And now I
Mm-hmm.
had to take that and put it out into the real world, which was supposed to be the test. For anybody listening thinking that it is the real test, it is not the real test.
Mm-hmm.
It is one
That's
of one
absolutely
of the
right.
tests. One of the
Yeah.
tests.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually took a job in furniture sales until I just to build up my vocabulary in talking to people about design, about furniture, about details, materials, and things like that. And I did that for a year. So while it wasn't a design, like a job in a design firm per se, at
Mm-hmm.
least I was doing
Mm-hmm.
something adjacent. And I did that for I think about a year or so.
Mm-hmm.
And a good friend of mine helped me realize that it was time to kind of take off the crutches.
Right.
And I had worked hard enough and
Mm-hmm.
grown my skill set for long enough that it was time to kind of like spread your wings and fly, not to sound cliche.
Yeah.
And it was 2005. Being based in Toronto, it was a very different landscape at the
Mm-hmm.
time for interior design. It's changed a whole lot in the last 20 years, but even in the last 15 years. But 2005, I found was for me, it was is challenging. I had studied in San Francisco for 3 years, and so I didn't have a connection to the design community in Toronto.
Okay.
I started to develop that as I had my job in furniture sales, but I didn't have as big of a network as I did when I was in San Francisco with my friends and professors and whatnot. So it was really about the cold call.
Yeah. Yes.
And
Absolutely.
the cold call then wasn't sending emails. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
applying
Mm-hmm.
on apps or on websites. This
Mm.
was pre-monster.ca, if anybody knows what that is still.
Yeah.
It's before Indeed.
Throwback. Yeah.
It's before Indeed. Like, forget LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Mm-hmm.
pre-Facebook.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
what I did, with the help of my community of friends who were very encouraging, not all of them in design,
Mm-hmm.
was I put together a cover letter that talked about who I was,
Mm-hmm.
of course, the CV, but more importantly, and for anybody applying for design jobs, you know how important this component is. It's your portfolio. And
Correct.
while I wasn't able to just send or give physical copies again, people were still using fax machines. So I wasn't able
Mm-hmm.
to give physical copies to everyone. I printed out, it was probably about 4 by 6, a little mini book that kind of unfolded
Oh my
into, it
God.
was probably like 3 feet long, 3 or 4 feet long by the time it unfolded. And it was my sketches and some of my image boards and
Cute.
some of my work.
Mm-hmm.
And a good friend of mine, Michelle, she said, you have to make your mark. You have to
Yeah.
make your impression. You
Mm-hmm.
have to get your foot in the door. And literally,
Mm-hmm.
I had to get my foot in the door. Calling wasn't it. Yes, we had
Mm-hmm.
email, but it wasn't it. I applied to probably about 10 or 12 different places, interior design firms, even developers. Anywhere that I thought would give me the exposure and experience to get my dream job eventually, whatever
Yeah.
that meant. I just needed something that got me in the door and was able to give me exposure to our industry.
Yeah.
Because there's many facets to our industry. Um,
Absolutely, there is. Coming out of school and not necessarily getting a design job, I think that's so brilliant because that's sort of something very similar to my story. I worked in furniture retail and it was, this incredible sort of antique gallery where, they specialized in bringing in sort of Indian antiques,
mm,
antiques from China, and then these beautiful rugs from Afghanistan. And this is what I feel like really helped me sort of influence the way that I like to design now, where it's like that mix of old and new and antiques and all this stuff. And I feel like being sort of like a new designer right out of school, you don't necessarily have that experience. So the fact that you did that, I'm sure not only gave you really incredible sort of communication skills, because if you're working in a retail environment, you're constantly talking to people and you have to sell yourself or sell a product or whatever it is. So I think that's very important.
yeah. And it
Mm-hmm.
gave me a bit of the business acumen to just
Yeah.
understand what a follow-up looks like,
Mm-hmm.
what it was like to make a meaningful connection, and meaningful within the
Mm-hmm.
context of a very transactional relationship, but
For
meaningful
sure.
nonetheless.
Totally.
Lasting impression. It was practice, being able to talk on the fly about a product
Mm-hmm.
and now being able to talk about a product that is much bigger than myself. And I think that, if I hadn't done that, I may not be where I am now. I think
Absolutely.
I think cold calling applied to 10 to 12 different places. I tried to edit the list a little bit to places
Sure.
that I felt aligned with the type of work that I knew I wanted to do. And I think that that's an important part. Sometimes we have to take a job for taking a job, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Mm.
And one by one, they were all no's.
Right.
I don't want to sound dramatic, but it was literally the door
No,
slamming
please
in your
go ahead.
face.
Be as
And
be as dramatic as possible here.
okay, go.
This
Well,
is
then, no.
yeah, yes,
Um,
exactly.
It was literally like everybody was
Mm-hmm.
slamming the door in the face. I did everything that I was taught to do at the time. Things are different now, but at the time,
Mm-hmm.
you went in, you submitted your application, and you followed up 5 business days later with a
Of
phone
course.
call.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I did that. And every time I was like, oh, I think I have a chance. They seemed really receptive. I would get in the
Mm-hmm.
door, hand in my portfolio, my resume, and nobody wanted to talk to me.
That is happening to somebody right now, and they
Yeah.
are sort of just not getting anywhere. They're just getting that sort of closed, shut door on their face
Yeah.
every single time they try to do something.
I think that's really challenging. And we are in a difficult position now in terms
Mm-hmm.
of the economy. Whatever I say it might sound trite, but I think the biggest piece of advice is no matter how difficult it is to do this, It's not about you. It's not personal.
Okay.
I'm going to say something now that might contradict that, but really there are a number of factors that go into, and I see this now, I didn't know this then, but there are a number of factors that go into what does a relationship look like? Every employer looks for something different. It is about that special connection that happens when it's the right fit. It's the right
Absolutely.
applicant for the right job
Mm-hmm.
at the right time. And it is
Mm-hmm.
very much about at the right time.
Totally.
And that's what it was when I applied to Yabu Pushelberg. It was really surreal, the whole application process. It was my last stop. I had submitted a application a week before and I did my 5-day follow-up. And I got a phone call back for this at this other firm. And they said, we would like to talk to you. And in the nicest way possible, I'm not trying to sound shady, but in the nicest way possible, the feedback that I received was don't aim so high.
Oh.
Those were the literal words. Don't aim so high. We do a certain caliber of work. You need to have junior level experience. You need to have
Okay.
maybe work on a construction site, maybe work in a mill workshop. It was a really hard thing to hear,
Mm-hmm.
especially growing up when you have so many fans from your grandparents to your parents to
Mm-hmm.
your
Mm-hmm.
teachers, hopefully yourself. But it
Hmm.
was a really hard thing to hear. And the next day I had planned to drop off my resume and portfolio to Yabu Pushelberg.
Hmm.
And I almost didn't
Oh my
because
God.
because of that feedback to not aim so
Mm-hmm.
high. And it was a good firm, but Yabu Pushelberg is Yabu Pushelberg.
Is Yabu Pushelberg, yeah.
Right. And I was like, if I'm not supposed to aim so high, what business do I have?
Mm-hmm.
What's the worst thing that
Mm-hmm.
can happen? And I think that that's another thing that we all have to keep in mind. If you don't go for it, you're definitely not going to get it.
Totally. You're never gonna know unless you try.
I
Tell me.
dropped off my resume on a Friday. The hiring manager was traveling, and on the Monday they called me back. I went in Tuesday for my first interview, and
Hmm.
the second interview was with Glenn Pushelberg himself. All I know is that I started on February 14, 2005,
Hmm.
which was a Monday, Valentine's Day,
Love it.
and my longest relationship to date. It was effortless. And I think that's what I mean by the right time, the right
Mm-hmm.
employer, the right position. A lot of it is personality, a lot of it is
Mm-hmm.
culture fit. And then, of course, alignment in terms of aesthetic and working style and all of that. But it's not just about you. Going
I
just
think
about
that's
you.
brilliant. I think that creativity sometimes just is one of those things where it's so personal
Oh,
that if
yeah.
you put yourself out there, that it's sometimes hard not to take it personally. But I think
Yeah.
we have to learn not to take it personally.
Yeah.
Speaking of Yabu Pusherberg and
Mhm.
sort of like, your trajectory, you obviously started as a junior.
Mhm. Why do you assume
And
that?
well, girl, because you were just straight out of school. Like, no, you went straight to design director.
I
Is
was
that right?
design
Your
director.
Cinderella
Yeah, that,
story?
yes. Um,
Rags to riches, honey.
Fine. I was a junior designer when I first started. I spent about 3.5 years as a junior designer. I was promoted to intermediate, probably another 3.5 years, and then up to
Mm-hmm.
senior slash project leader until I kind of took my little break in 2017.
Right. Yes. But you just kept on moving forward. And the
Yeah.
break was because.
At the time that I left Yabu Pushelberg, I was about to turn 40, and it really was for me. That was one
Mm-hmm.
thing that I did for me, truly and
Mm-hmm.
only for nobody. It wasn't for my
Mm-hmm.
parents. It wasn't for my then boyfriend, now husband. It wasn't about anybody else except me.
Mm-hmm.
I had been at that point with Yabu Pushelberg for 12 and a half years, and
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to see what working abroad looked like.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to see if I could, at 39, pick up and go and do something a little bit different, but still
Mm-hmm.
working in design. And it had nothing to do with being unhappy at work, which I think
Mm-hmm.
is probably was by design a very good thing for me, because then it really was just about me. About me doing something else. I moved to Singapore in 2017 and I was there until the pandemic.
And I think that's such an important lesson too, just to hear you talk about sort of why you left. And, when we talk about taking things personally, as, like creative director of Aly Velji Designs, I've seen lots of people come and go. And sometimes it's really hard not to take that personally when somebody leaves. But to hear you say that, and to say that you just left for yourself because you needed to do it for you, like that's sort of an eye-opening experience. They just need to have a moment to sort of do something else and experience something else.
It goes back. It's about you. It's about them. It's about the timing, personal circumstances. But it is, going back to a point you made earlier, it is very difficult to not take things personally in design. Especially when I first started off in my career, you put so much of yourself into the work. It's not even that you want to impress someone and prove a point and show what you got. Yes, you do. You want to show what you have. But I think that as creative people, design is an emotional process, or can be a very emotional process. And I think once you realize that, you can step away from it a little bit. But starting off in my career, everything I thought, you know what? I'm really proud of this. I want everyone to love it just as much as I do, because you're part of a team. And then when you get feedback can sometimes, you can take it personally, be like, oh no, they hate it. I'm not good enough. And it's so easy to go from that high of like, I did this thing that I've never done before and I was able to do it, to receiving anything except praise. And then it's like, I'm not great. I'm not good.
It's a
and
crash.
That's not true. But I think as soon as you realize that, and when you grow in your career, and this I think goes for any field of work, when you grow in your career and you begin to mentor and give feedback, you understand, that your words really do matter, and it can be interpreted any number of ways.
Absolutely.
And hopefully those who have experienced receiving feedback in a number of ways then grow to become managers and leaders who understand how to give feedback.
Jonathan's talking about creating connections and mentoring people. And this reminds me exactly why Robinson Lighting and Bath works so well for us. They're not just filling orders, but they're helping create solutions. Need something custom? They've got you. Timeline looking tight? They've got your back. Just visit robinsonco.ca or visit one of their gorgeous showrooms to experience the best in lighting and plumbing. It's very, very important because, again, you don't know who on the receiving side of whatever you're saying, how they're going to take it. And the last thing you want is for them to feel completely just miserable, or that they failed, or that they're just not good enough.
So to me, it's kind of like if you make it a conversation and you start with, what are we trying to achieve? Why does this not achieve that? And here's something that might help you in trying again.
Totally. Absolutely.
And it can be that quick. That was 30 seconds, maybe not even.
Yeah. When you talk about your trajectory and sort of starting off as a junior, working your way up, taking that little break, now you're back at Yabu Pushelberg.
Yeah, I'm the director of business development and I oversee Asia and the Americas. So
that's fabulous. How has your role changed now?
I think the easiest way to put it is that I went from doing the design work, into promoting the design work. That's kind of how it is. It was a very interesting opportunity that came up, and it wasn't one that I saw for myself. I believe that we have to grow and have new experiences, and that's what keeps us motivated, engaged in our employment. I was very happy at the time. I was leading a team of 12 designers. We were coming out of the pandemic and everyone was in good spirits. I was feeling good about the work that our team was producing, and this opportunity to lead business development for Yabu Pushelberg came up. It was one of those situations where I knew I couldn't say no, not in the sense that I was forced to do it. When I was approached for this opportunity and I had George and Glenn sitting in a room with me asking me to take on this role, and understanding that they believed in me and that they chose me to do this, I couldn't say no. Even though at the time I wasn't sure if I could do this role.
Right.
I wasn't feeling at my best. And they said, we choose you to work here. And
I love that.
And they asked me to take on this role, which I hadn't envisioned for myself. But when you have enough people that you respect believing in you, then, you know, you kind of have no choice but to believe in yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think
And you took that jump.
and I did. I took the leap. I said sure, and didn't know what I was doing for a little while. You know what? Why not?
Yes.
Why not try?
Why not?
Why
Absolutely.
not? I didn't ask for it in this case, but I was offered it, and
Yeah.
I was told that I could do this job, and I'm doing it now. But at the time, it was just like, let's go along for the ride. Let's try. You know what? We believe that you can do this job. Then who am I to say no?
That's truly incredible what you're doing. And that has brought you so much travel, and you've been around the world now, which is so amazing. I'm just super happy for you, and, you know, wish you absolutely nothing but the best. I always like to leave these conversations with asking a question, because for me, when I sort of need to feel inspired or get motivated or just basically walk into a room, I always light a candle. What is the one thing that you do that sort of motivates you or just sort of gets you feeling inspired?
I think in terms of inspiration, I'm going to take this as two questions, so it's fair
Get
with
it.
me.
Yes.
I think in terms of staying inspired and remaining motivated and connected to design and creativity, I think being able to travel for work and meet new creatives, meet people who are trying to do something different in terms of design with such passion about this project that they want to do, that is really motivating. It makes me want to find a way to work together. That's one thing that keeps me inspired. And not to mention seeing design and architecture and culture in all of its many
100%.
forms around the
Yes.
world. Travel for work is not always sexy, and it can be tiring. And that's when I think it comes down to like that moment for me when I come home. That's what keeps me grounded and keeps me able to move forward and keep going. And that moment for me is just surrounding myself, connecting back after having been away for 2-3 weeks with people I love, and myself included. What keeps me grounded is giving back to me.
I like that.
Yeah.
I love that. Now, what an end. That was epic. Wow. Okay. Give back to yourself. You heard it here first. Yes.
I mean, I think it's important. We all have to give back to ourselves. I mean, we have nothing
100%.
to give. If we don't refill our cup, I think is a saying, then there's nothing to
Absolutely. Yes.
So,
Well, I mean, 100%. I'm in agreement with that. And with that, thank you so much for
Thank
taking
you.
time out of your busy schedule and chatting with me. I really, really appreciate it. And
give. Anything for you.
that was Jonathan Sotto from Yabu Pushelberg. What an inspiring human being and such a good friend. I mean, that Beyoncé t-shirt, come on, that was pretty epic. Thank you so much for being here. You can follow Jonathan at Yes It's Jonathan on Instagram. And a huge thanks to Robinson Lighting and Bath for sponsoring this incredible episode. And as always, thanks to you for watching and for listening. And if you can please help me spread the AVD Inspire word by liking, subscribing, and of course sharing with anyone that you think needs a little inspiration in their life. Until next time, I'll see you later.